Yeah, hello everyone, and we are back to another session around this time a buzzword called Retrospective. My name is Dennis Hofer. I'm happy to have you here today and that you're watching this. If you want to know more about me, there is an intro video which is, I think, called About Me. Normally I'm talking in the context of Agile, Scrum, and big enterprises, not so much startups, and try to demystify a few things which you are encountering when you are implementing Scrum or another Agile methodology, and most of the time it is quite a lot. So when a new method comes about, you get so much input, so many various things, and where new words are being used all the time. Agile is the first one you might find. Maybe even coaching is a new or a buzzword in the context of an Agile transformation. And then, of course, it goes along, and retrospectives and Scrum and planning meetings and daily stand-ups and velocity and all these things. And I try to demystify every now and then another word. And today it is retrospective. And so far we had customer, and we were also talking about the word Agile itself. So if you're interested into those, there's videos available. Retrospective is a key element in an Agile implementation. Agile is very much about inspect and adopt. Meaning you are observing how things are going, and then you derive a lessons learned out of it, and then you implement this lessons learned. So that sounds pretty straightforward, but funny enough, most of these things are not normal when you're looking into, let's say, best practice on a waterfall project. So often, for instance, waterfall project in my life had a minimum requirement, and this is at the end of the project you were doing a lessons learned. You were putting this into a knowledge base so other project managers could learn from it, and then you would complete the project, and that's it. The bad thing about this is obviously that if you're doing this towards the end of the project, it doesn't help you during the execution. So if we take Scrum as an example, Scrum starts somewhere. Let's say this is here our starting point, and then it goes on and on and on and on and on and on, and then it finishes. And this is maybe 1 year elapsed time. In Scrum we have time boxes, and within these time boxes we always do the following. We do plan in a so-called iteration. And an iteration consists of multiple things. It is, let's say, between 1 to 4 weeks long. And within those 1 to 4 weeks, we are doing a planning meeting at the very beginning. We then do a few things. I'm not going into too much detail. And then after 4 weeks, we finish and we look how well did we do the plan or against the plan, and basically show the results. So this is where another meeting happens. And then once we have checked on the results, we're doing a thing called retrospective, where we basically look into the past and say what things worked well, what things didn't go so well, and what are we trying to do better next time. So actions which are tangible will be implemented. And as we go through the project, we said 1 year. Let's assume for a second we would go with a 4-weekly cycle. So we would have whatever, maybe 12 of those iterations. I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and here's the 12s. So in here we always do this little thing, planning and retrospective, and planning and retrospective, and another lesson learned and actions implemented, another lesson learned, actions implemented throughout the complete thing. And so we learn already as we go along. And of course, as individuals, this is so logic. I always say Scrum is a bit common sense applied in reality, but you would normally assume that these things are natural, but they are not. There are a lot of teams who are not really interested in coming together and talking for an hour every 2, 3, or 4 weeks, or 2 hours around what things went well and what things didn't go so well. Often it's seen as a waste of time, but it is one of the core elements of an agile implementation that we are doing this on a regular basis, because whatever our working style is, even if we're doing not an agile working style as such, as soon as we start having a retrospective in there and start to question what things are helping us and what things are hindering us from being efficient or effective or delivering in the way it is fun and useful, whatever the aim is, but you will naturally start to adopt your way of working along the way. You start to get to know each other a bit better. You start to define measures, rules, KPIs, processes which are helping you as a team to do a good job. So when you have nothing in your let's say portfolio right now, you are starting on an empty canvas, the one meeting you could implement and nothing else would be a retrospective, and from there on you would develop whatever structures a team would need. So retrospectives are basically the continuous improvement which happens along the project, and the big advantage towards the lessons learned at the end is that you learn with the same group of people in the same context what could be improved, and you do it during the year. Whilst in the other example, you would do a lessons learned in the context, also from a timing point of view, in the point at this point in time, you do a lesson learned, you will say, this is what worked for us, this is what didn't work for us. You do this after 1 year, and actually it's a completely new set of people who might look at this knowledge base in the best way example, and they would say, okay, what can we take away from it? And it might be that your lessons learned are pretty fast outdated. They just fit maybe to the context, to the goal of this particular project, and they're hard to translate into new projects. So this is why it is questionable whether these lessons learned at the end have bigger value for other projects. By the way, my experience with those retrospectives at the very end are that they are very helpful to close a project off. To say, okay, we have now been together for a year or 2 years. It was quite exciting. We learned a lot. Let's summarize what we learned maybe as a group of people, and what things worked well in our interaction, what things we might be doing differently if we were coming into a new project. So it is interesting to close it off, but from a continuous improvement, from what helps a project to actually become more efficient, or a team to become more efficient, this is where the retrospectives have an effect if they're just done once at the very end. Another thing to mention here is the skepticism. The skepticism doesn't come from that people don't want to improve. It comes from that you're raising things in a retrospective which are not working well. And let's have a look on what happens usually. So this is the stuff people do raise in retrospectives which doesn't work. Let's make a few examples. Typical thing in retrospective is, my colleague stinks. Could actually comes up. So let's put the colleague stink thing with a slightly different color in here, and this is this. And then we have another one which is, my PC is too slow. And let's say for now that this is the fastest PC we can buy at the moment in this company. And here we come back to enterprises. Yeah, what's possible. So let's say this is this color here, and this is this topic. Can't, or maybe my PC is too slow. Then the next person comes on and says, I wanted to buy a new license for Visual Studio because blah, 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 whatever. And the procurement department right now, the purchasing process is really slow. Okay, so let's put this over here. What else is there? Typical one is feature XYZ we have developed really stinks. It is not maintainable. We can't really have this in the long run. It is causing the longer we wait, the more administrative maintenance work it requires, and it becomes really cumbersome, and it's super hard to change. Okay, let's put this here. And then there's the last one, and that is in my work, I find that our, daily stand-up, for instance, always takes a bit longer than it should. It takes way more. It takes more than 15 minutes. Plus, I think the content we share there is not very efficient because it doesn't help me to plan my day. It seems to be just an update to the Scrum Master. Okay, so let's take this also here. Now we draw 3 little circles. I know it's not a pig. And this is what we call the level of influence. So when we talk about the stuff which is in here, the stinking colleague, the feature which is hard to maintain, and the can't remember the third one. So when we look at these things which are here, this is stuff we can change. I was daily stand-up taking too long. So these are 3 things we can change. We can give feedback to this colleague. Someone needs to raise this, and potentially it's not a colleague who's in the retrospective, otherwise maybe they wouldn't have put it up. But in this particular case, this guy was on holiday when this was raised. So this is it is really human interaction, teamwork. We are sitting in the same place, so that was an important one to bring up apparently. And then you define actions for those things which are in your level of influence or level of control. So this is maybe the strongest option you have, that you have something in your level of control. Then you have stuff which is in your level of influence. So you could say maybe the colleague is actually sitting here. So you can't really change that, but you can give him feedback and somehow make him aware. And then we have the level which is outside our level of influence. And in a lot of enterprises, if you have a high-performing spec PC, which is already, let's say, in the catalog, in the standard the company offers, but it needs to be something completely, let's say, outside the norm, outside the standards the company is offering, this can become quite impossible. You might not be able to do this. You might have a constraint there. Of course, you have a Scrum Master, another buzzword we won't explain today. You have maybe people, managers, and other people around who can try to push this, but there's nothing the team really can do themselves on this. And it needs to be clearly understood, where is the level of influence, how far does it get, how far can you actually also maybe stretch this boundary here, so how much can you bring from your level of influence to your level of control, and what can you bring with enough effort from outside of control and influence into at least influenceable things. But of course, the cost is further as you go out here increases dramatically. Cost solving problems which are in here is either impossible or it is really, really costly and time consuming, whilst the stuff which is in here is something you can actually resolve yourself. So, long story short, some of the, let's say, lack of enthusiasm for retrospectives might be coming from the fact that people are often complaining about things which are in this area here. Because stuff which is in here is either too touchy, because the feature you're criticizing is something someone else built and he's sitting next to you and would actually criticize his work, or the daily stand-up is the same. They don't dare to talk about the daily stand-up being just a report to the Scrum Master, because the Scrum Master is, for whatever sick reason, line manager. Or the line manager is in the room and they would criticize the line manager with this. So whatever the reason is, so some of the stuff which is a bit juicy but important and could actually be resolved doesn't get mentioned. The stuff outside here, where you complain about company mechanics and organizational things, is hard to change. And then there's stuff which is in here which might be something you would address, but maybe it's maybe not. Maybe the meat to the bone is actually only fully there if you're doing all three, if you touch on all three levels. So this is essentially one hypothesis I have. So if teams are in the state where they start to feel that a retrospective is not very useful, I think it's then time for a reset, time to read maybe a book like Agile Retrospectives or from Derby and Larson. So this is definitely an option. And try to remember why you're doing retrospectives. What is the purpose for them? So making the team more efficient, working better together. And there are also tons of other reasons why retrospective doesn't work. The team isn't a team. People work very individually. There's nothing they jointly can resolve. There are endless amounts of reasons. But let's wind back to the very beginning. We're working together as a team. We try to achieve a common goal. And there is interaction between us. And this is something we would like to improve. We would like to find ways how to improve our interaction or our outcome as a team. And we do this on a regular basis. And we're sitting together on a regular basis and we try to define jointly how to improve our way of working. And unless we find this one team in the world which is perfect, there's always room to grow. There's always room for improvement. So if the retrospective doesn't work, there's a different reason to it, then the meeting doesn't make sense. Okay, that was a bit longer than I thought. I hope you like it. I'm still finding ways how to tune my setup here a little bit more optimally. So please bear with me. Today we touched on retrospective. Don't know what we'll touch on next time. I have thought about whether Agile is now fully done and dusted in terms of definition. And my gut feeling it isn't, but defining the word Agile is a larger topic, so maybe do it at a different point in time.